I met someone who treats me the way you never did. That was the opening line of the email. No greeting, no explanation. Just that, and a brutal declaration beneath it. I've moved your inheritance into an account under my name. It's better this way. My name is Garrett Monroe, and I'm a 46-year-old commercial designer based in Denver, Colorado. I was sitting in my downtown loft, catching up on invoices, when the message lit up my screen at 10:48 p.m. Mountain Time. My wife of 14 years, Melissa, had flown to a so-called wellness getaway with her closest girlfriends, or so she claimed. One of those friends had a beard, a man bun, and his hand on the small of her back in the photo she accidentally attached. The amount she referred to, $689,000, wasn't just money. It was a legacy. It was left to me by my uncle, Franklin, the man who raised me after my parents were killed in a freak highway accident when I was 15. He worked 30 years on the maintenance crew at Denver International and never spent a dime on himself. He saved that money so I could build something no one could take from you. But Melissa tried. She didn't ask. She didn't warn me. She took like I was some disposable obstacle in her next spiritual journey. But she didn't know that the money had never been where she thought it was. I'd sensed her distancing months ago, her new passwords, silent dinners, the sudden interest in joint account consolidation. So, I replied with 6 words that carried more weight than any outburst ever could. Thanks for keeping me informed. Then I closed my laptop, poured a bourbon, and looked across the city skyline. No rage, no begging, just a strange, powerful stillness. I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a reckoning. Melissa didn't realize that she'd just handed me every piece of leverage I'd need by hitting send. And tomorrow? Tomorrow was going to be very, very different. I didn't respond with outrage. I didn't call her. I didn't even flinch. I just stared at the screen at the digital knife she'd twisted without hesitation and exhaled. Something inside me didn't break. It just reset. That night, I didn't sleep on the couch. I didn't tear through our closet, looking for more lies. I poured a second glass of bourbon, turned off the lights, and crawled into the king-sized bed we'd once picked out together in a Portland showroom when we still thought forever meant something. She wasn't coming back, and for the first time in months, I slept. I've designed buildings across 10 states. I know structure. I know when a foundation is cracked beyond repair. This one was done. The thing is, I'd known something was off since February. Melissa's girls' retreats had gone from weekends to week-long excursions. Her phone lay face down. Passwords changed. Conversations shrunk into monosyllables. She'd started asking about my inheritance, where it was kept, how it was accessed. I gave vague answers. I wasn't stupid. I just wanted to see how far she'd go. So, when that email arrived from some overpriced resort in Sedona, I wasn't blindsided. I was confirmed, validated. She'd crossed a line I had already drawn in the sand. The silence that followed wasn't just herdsman too. No emotional outburst, no social media hints, just stillness. Because she thought she had won, but she was playing checkers. I had been designing chessboards since my 20s. At 7:12 a.m. the next morning, I got up, made coffee, and reopened the email, not out of pain, but out of precision. I copied the attachment. I screenshotted the metadata. I noted the timestamp and the location ping. She had no idea what she'd triggered. The world she believed she controlled was already unraveling, and I hadn't even made my first move. People think betrayal begins with a single act, but they're wrong. It's a slow, fadeous shift in tone, temperature, and how long someone looks at you before answering a simple question. Melissa and I met 17 years ago at an urban design expo in Seattle. She was launching her holistic skincare brand, and I, Garrett Monroe, then 29, was starting to break out in commercial architecture. She needed someone to design her flagship store. I needed to believe in something that wasn't a parking garage or another strip mall. We got married 3 years later. Built a sleek, modern home in Boulder, Colorado steel beams, floor-to-ceiling glass, and a view of the Flatirons she claimed would align her energy. We had no kid-sure decision, and I respected it. My brand is my baby, she'd say with a laugh that used to be music. I understood. My buildings were mine. For years, it worked. We looked like power partners. She hosted retreats, sold out product lines, and landed features in glossy wellness magazines. I built retail chains, boutique hotels, and corporate campuses. We were the kind of couple that strangers envied from across a restaurant. Then my uncle Franklin got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Quick. Ruthless. I took 4 months off to be with him in Santa Fe. Melissa visited once. Said hospitals drained her spirit. I didn't push. I was focused on making sure the man who raised me didn't die alone. When Franklin passed, I inherited everything. I didn't expect that. I didn't even know he'd invested so smartly over the years. Melissa was shocked, too. Her tone shifted that night over dinner. We could use it to scale, she said, swirling her wine, we, meaning her. I remember staring into that glass and realizing for the first time, maybe she wasn't asking. Perhaps she was plotting. By the time the cracks became obvious, the damage was already done. I wasn't blindsided, I was cataloging, waiting, watching. It started with password changes. First, to our shared banking apps she hadn't touched in years. Then came the phone. Always face down. Always silenced. Her texts were shorter. Her laughs are rarer. And when they came, they were no longer mine. 3 months before that email, Melissa had begun asking oddly specific questions. Garrett, how many accounts do you have again? Is your uncle's money in stocks or something safer? Should we merge everything? Simplify things a bit? I'd smile, play dumb, and change the subject. She thought I was distracted by client calls and design contracts. But I was collecting patterns because I already knew this wasn't a drift. It was a strategy. The confirmation came on a Thursday morning, 8:17 a.m., via a call from Marcia, my financial advisor of 9 years. There have been multiple attempts, she said. Someone tried to access your trust accounts. They had your full name, social security, and even your last known address, but they couldn't pass the security layers. Were they trying to move anything? They didn't get far enough, but the activity logs are real. Someone's poking around. I didn't ask who. I already knew. That evening, Melissa breezed through the door, glowing from her yoga session, already sipping a turmeric protein shake. We really should talk to someone about consolidating everything. It's silly how many accounts we're juggling. Her eyes didn't meet mine. I nodded. You're right. I'll set something up with Marcia. Instead, I met with Daniel Ward, Franklin's longtime estate attorney in Santa Fe. I laid out everything, my suspicions, her sudden interest in my inheritance, the access attempts. I kept emotion out of it. Just facts, dates, names, behavior changes. Daniel leaned back after reviewing the trust structure. She can't touch it, he said. Your uncle made it bulletproof. And if she's trying, that's attempted financial fraud traceable, prosecutable. I didn't smile. I didn't feel victorious. I just nodded. Then, let's monitor everything. Set alerts. Backdate everything she touched. I left his office with grim clarity. Melissa wasn't testing boundaries. She was preparing an escape. And now, I wasn't prepared to stop her. I was preparing to catch her. Melissa thought she was clever, quiet, calculated. But she didn't realize that the more careful she became, the more obvious it looked from my side. I didn't need to dig through her texts or track her location. I already knew where to look, and more importantly, where she'd forget to cover her tracks. That Saturday morning, after she'd left for her healing weekend in Tulum, I sat in my home office with a black coffee, opened our shared cloud drive, and scrolled to a folder labeled Home Decor, Aspen Vision Board, which seemed innocent. It's almost too innocent. I clicked. Inside were screenshots, dozens of them. Account statements, email drafts, PDFs with routing numbers and notes, scribbled like she was planning a merger, not a marriage. One whiteboard photo hit me hardest. My inheritance amount, minus 30%, next to the estimated legal risk. She'd been rehearsing this for months. She had notes on my banking routines, login hints, security question 7, the name of my childhood dog, which she'd once laughed about forgetting. I realized then that she hadn't forgotten anything. She'd been pretending. I didn't panic. I didn't even blink. I closed the folder, backed everything up to an encrypted drive, and then walked room by room through our Boulder home, through the curated spaces we had built together, piece by piece, memory by memory. Every painting, every chair, and every wall color told a story. But now, all I saw were props in a well-directed performance. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat on the patio beneath the string lights we'd hung together 3 summers ago and listened to the silence. That was when it clicked. She thought this was going to be easy. She thought she'd walk away with the money and a new life. But she'd just entered her trap, and I had the blueprint. Monday couldn't come fast enough. I waited exactly 24 hours before making my move. No confrontation, no emotional theatrics, just execution. At 8:02 a.m. on Monday, I forwarded Melissa's email. the one where she'd confessed to transferring my inheritance, along with the photo of her sunset getaway to two people. Marcia, my financial advisor, and Daniel Ward, my estate attorney. I added just one line beneath it. Documentation as discussed. Proceed accordingly. Within minutes, they replied with identical responses. Understood. We're in motion. I didn't need to explain anything further. Everything I'd gathered, screenshots, folders, metadata timestamps, IP pings, was already in their hands. A legal perimeter now surrounded the trap Melissa had unknowingly walked into. By noon, my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen. Melissa Monroe. I didn't pick up. 5 minutes later, a message came through. Did you get my email? I didn't reply. Another text followed. That's all you have to say? Still, I said nothing. Instead, I drove downtown to Ward and Coleman LLP, where Daniel had arranged a private consultation room. He was already waiting, tie loosened, glasses perched low on his nose. On the screen behind him was Marcia, patched in remotely. Daniel spoke first. The attempted transfer created a clear digital trail. We've logged everything. The inheritance was placed in an irrevocable trust untouchable. And her email? It's an open admission. We have grounds for financial misconduct, which in this state overrides standard divorce statutes. I nodded, silent, then asked, what's the next step? File immediately, establish intent, and include the cloud evidence. The sooner we move, the more control we retain. I signed the papers then and there. At 4:37 p.m., she called again. This time, I picked up. No, hi. No, how are you? Just, you're being dramatic. I kept my voice flat. I disagree. We can handle this like adults, she insisted. That would have required honesty. That ship is sunk. There was a pause. Then came her angle. The money's already moved. Fighting this will rack up attorney fees for both of us. My response was surgical. Where are you staying? What? Why does that matter? Just curious where home is now. She didn't answer that. Instead, she pivoted. I'm having my attorney draft a clean settlement. You'll get everything else. I want to move on. Who's representing you? I asked. Philip Barnes. He's already reviewing the accounts. I jotted the name down and ended the call with 2 words. Thank you. 10 minutes later, I rang Daniel. She's brought in Barnes, I told him. His reaction was immediate. He's aggressive but careful. We'll send over everything today. By morning, Melissa's team had received a neatly organized package. Her original email. Metadata logs from our cloud storage. Evidence of the attempted access to trust funds. A notarized statement from our neighbor confirming a man repeatedly visiting while I was away. Bank activity reports show $146,000 quietly drained from our joint accounts. Her Scottsdale apartment lease. A time-stamped export log from our home Wi-Fi. That same afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Barnes's assistant requesting a private settlement meeting. Translation. They'd seen enough. She was exposed. Daniel looked at me after the call and said, "She underestimated you. Completely." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. This wasn't about rage or revenge anymore. This was a reclamation. And it was just getting started. The truth always finds a way out. Sometimes through confrontation, sometimes through silence, and sometimes through paperwork and IP logs. Less than 24 hours after Melissa's legal team received the file, I got a call from Barnes's office. His tone had shifted. The earlier confidence, gone. In its place, restraint. Caution. Mr. Monroe, we believe it's in the best interest of all parties to arrange a discreet meeting to discuss terms. Translation. They'd seen the evidence and knew exactly how deep the hole was. The digital trail alone was damning 3 unauthorized attempts to access the trust accounts, all recorded in high fidelity, matched to the exact Wi-Fi network in our home, and later to an IP address in Scottsdale, Arizona, the same city where Melissa had conveniently extended her retreat. Rita, Daniel's associate from estate compliance, called that same evening. We traced multiple logins to a device registered in your home. We have timestamps, Massachusetts C addresses, and screenshots of exported data. We've documented it all. And we've submitted everything to the Trust Legal Protection Board for independent review. That was when I felt it. Not victory, not rage, but gravity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't impulsive. This was premeditated, coordinated, and calculated. While sipping black tea in my kitchen that night, I received a text from Melissa. "We need to talk." I responded with one line. When you have a new attorney, we'll talk. Her reply came seconds later. You've overreacted. I was angry when I sent that email. I didn't move the funds. I didn't bother replying. Instead, I sent one question. Who is he? 20 minutes of silence passed. Then, this isn't about him. I asked again. Name? Another long pause. Jason Berkeley. But he's just helping me figure things out. I searched for the name. Former financial advisor. Current yoga instructor in Scottsdale. Left Wall Street 3 years ago to pursue spiritual clarity. Of course. The next morning, I knocked on my neighbor Ellis's door, the same Ellis who had once casually mentioned seeing a bearded man drop Melissa off late one night. Ellis, I asked, would you recognize that guy if you saw him again? He nodded and pulled off his cap. Tall, kinda rugged, drove a gray Tesla? I showed him the photo Melissa had mistakenly attached to her first email. He squinted. That's him. I've seen him here more than a few times while you were out of town. I asked if he'd be willing to provide a notarized statement. He didn't hesitate. Back at Daniel's office, we finalized the counteroffer. Melissa would return half the money she'd taken from the joint accounts, roughly $72,000, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and relinquish all claims to the trust, the house, and my business assets. I wouldn't press fraud charges or initiate further civil action in exchange. Daniel looked up from the draft. You could go for more. With what we have, this could be a public takedown. I shook my head. I don't want more. I want closure. Then this is surgical. Exactly. Monday morning came. I arrived at the courthouse early, 8:03 a.m. The air was dry, cold, Colorado crisp. I sat in a glass-paneled consultation room with Daniel, my attorney, while an untouched paper cup of coffee cooled beside me. He laid out the finalized documents. Everything we had prepared: the counteroffer, the release terms, the non-disclosure clause. At 8:44, Melissa walked in. No lawyer, no entourage, no confidence, just her. She wore the ivory coat I'd given her on our 10th anniversary. I remember picking it out in Santa Fe. She loved the texture and said it made her feel elevated. Now, it hung heavy on her, like armor that no longer worked. Her eyes scanned the floor as she entered, as if meeting mine would set something in motion she couldn't control. Daniel stood, offered a neutral nod. She returned it, but barely. He slid the agreement across the table. These are the finalized terms, he said calmly. As discussed, you'll transfer $76,500, half of what was withdrawn from the joint account, back to Mr. Monroe within 24 hours. You agree to make no claims against the trust or his business assets, and you will sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding all aspects of this marriage and divorce. She said nothing. Her hands trembled as she lifted the pen. I watched her sign line after line, clause after clause, without hesitation or pride. Not a single question, not a single attempt to shift blame or ask for more, just compliance. When she finished, Daniel passed the document to me. I signed my portion with steady fingers. Then I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a small white envelope. She frowned slightly as I slid it across the table. What's this? She asked, her voice low, distant. The passwords, I replied, for the alarm, cloud storage, garage keypad, and anything else you might need to collect what's left. For the first time that morning, she looked at me. Looked, but she didn't find what she expected. No resentment, satisfaction, or smugness. She found nothing. And in that moment, I think she realized what she'd truly lost. Not the money, not the house, not the trust, but me. Daniel stood. We'll file the final documents this afternoon. Once the transfer is confirmed, the agreement is binding. She nodded, eyes now glassy. No tears. It's just the eerie clarity of someone watching the consequences catch up in real time. As she stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. I expected her to say something. Ask if I hated her. I may apologize, but she didn't. She clutched the envelope like it held the last piece of a puzzle she didn't want to finish. She left without turning back. I stayed for another 10 minutes, sitting in that glass box with the morning sun warming the floor, thinking about how clean an ending this was and how endings don't always come with satisfaction. Sometimes they come with silence. 3 days later, I received a confirmation from Daniel. Melissa had completed the transfer, signed all remaining filings, and officially dissolved the marriage. The case was closed. I walked into my Boulder home and sat at the long oak dining table where we'd once eaten dinner thrice weekly. I stared at the chair across from me, empty now. And not in a tragic way, but in how an exhale feels after holding your breath for too long. The house felt different, still full of furniture but stripped of pretense. I didn't cry. I didn't toast myself with whiskey. I just packed a box. 1. Then 2. Over the next 6 weeks, I sold the property. A young couple with a baby on the way bought it. They loved the open layout, the light, and the neighborhood. I told them about the hidden storage in the pantry and the custom dimmers. I didn't mention the betrayal or the late-night silence. Some spaces deserve fresh stories. I moved into a loft closer to downtown. Simple, clean lines, fewer things. No alarm codes. No shared accounts. No illusions. That fall, I met with Marcia and Daniel to restructure the remainder of the trust. Instead of letting it sit untouched, I created a scholarship foundation under my Uncle Franklin's name, funding architectural education for teens who had lost a parent or guardian. It felt right. He would have liked that. The first scholarship went to a 17-year-old girl from southern Utah, whose application essay described how buildings could become anchors in storms. I read it 3 times. Smiled. I wrote the approval note myself. One evening, as I returned from a site visit, I checked my mailbox and found a letter, but there was no return address. Inside was a check, $76,500, the remainder of what Melissa had taken. There was no note, no apology, just a line on the memo. The rest of what I owed. I folded the check and slipped it into the foundation ledger. Another scholarship, another storm anchored. Later that week, I sat on the balcony of my loft, sipping a strong black coffee while the city crept beneath me. I thought of everything I'd lost. But more importantly, I thought of what I never wanted back. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. Because sometimes, the loudest victory isn't the one you shout. It's the one you don't have to explain. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood in the doorway of my downtown loft barefoot, holding a mug of coffee watching the morning light pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. The place was quiet, clean, and unapologetically mine. No more shared calendars, no more whispered lies, just space, light, clarity. I'd stripped my life back to essentials. No more things that made noise without meaning. Gone were the curated shelves and decorative illusions of a perfect marriage. I kept the books that changed me, the photos that anchored me, and the desk I'd inherited from my Uncle Franklin, the man who taught me that building something lasting starts with knowing what's worth keeping. After Melissa and I signed the settlement, I channeled every remaining energy into forward motion. I'd already turned the trust into a scholarship fund in Franklin's name, but I wanted it to mean more than a bank account for strangers. I wanted it to honor his belief that beauty built with purpose can outlive betrayal. That fall, the Monroe Foundation awarded its first grant. The recipient was a 17-year-old girl from Missoula who had lost both parents in a fire and dreamed of designing trauma recovery centers for foster youth. Her essay read like a blueprint of hope. Architecture isn't just shelter, it's memory, it's healing, it's proof we're still standing. I couldn't have written it better myself. Later that week, I walked along the Boulder Creek path one Melissa and I used to bike together. I didn't avoid it out of grief. I walked it now as a man no longer haunted by what went wrong but humbled by what survived. My strength hadn't come from fighting her. It came from refusing to become her and not letting bitterness calcify into identity. At a small cafe, tucked under the trees, I met Marcia and Daniel for coffee. They'd helped me reclaim more than finances. They'd helped me reclaim silence, peace, stability. And when Marcia asked what I'd do next, I smiled and said, keep building. Because what came next didn't have to be loud. It just had to be mine. Some people think the most potent response to betrayal is revenge. I don't. Not anymore. I believe the most powerful thing you can do, the thing they never see coming, is rebuilding your life without them in it. Quietly, thoroughly, without apology. Melissa didn't just try to take my money. She tried to rewrite the meaning of trust, of home, of love. But here's what she never understood. When you take something from someone who's already been through the fire, you don't break them, you sharpen them. This journey didn't just teach me how to protect my legacy. It taught me how to protect my peace. It taught me that dignity isn't loud. Sometimes, it's walking away without the last word. Sometimes, it's building a scholarship fund to honor the man who believed in you when no one else did. Sometimes, it's handing your ex a set of passwords and never looking back. I don't tell this story for sympathy. I mean it because someone out there needs to hear it. You may watch this silently while wondering if you're strong enough to stand up, let go, and rebuild. You are. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You must remember who you were before they tried to redefine you. Before, they wanted to reduce you to what they could take. So, here's what I've learned. The person who walks away with grace always wins in the long run. And the life you rebuild from the ashes, it's stronger, it's quieter, it's yours. And that, right there, that's the part they can never steal.